Welcome into a new Buff Stampede Radio. Adam Munsterteiger, the publisher of BuffStampede.com, here to recap Colorado's 2023 football season with football analyst William Gardner, Buff Stampede staff writer Sean Niehoff, and 104.3 The Fans, Matt Smith. And that segues us into a very negative topic. Your least favorite moment from CU's 2023 football season.
You go, William. You start again. I got to deliberate. I got a couple here. Well, you know what? Yeah, go ahead.
Sean, you go then.
Okay, perfect.
All right, I'll start. So what I actually listed, and it's not really my least favorite moment, but was the change in the with the SID and the lack of having food in the press box this year. I understand why they did it. I understand all the changes that went along, but that was the most disappointing part of the season to me.
You don't like those hot dogs from Bulch Fieldhouse?
No. I think we, and you look back at it in hindsight too, and I think the press was a little bit spoiled because they were there weren't that many people covering the team, but also B, that was a little bit of a carrot, I think, to the good, right, the good food that we had in there. So that was disappointing. But from a team perspective, for me, it's the pretty obvious second half of the Stanford game. Despite the losses, the blowout at Oregon and then the loss in a game that you potentially could have won to USC for the first time ever. It was that collapse in the second half that really exposed a lot of the issues that we've discussed already in this roundtable, both on the field and off the field. So that to me is really the pivotal point in the season, and when things kind of unraveled and led us down the path of a 1-6 finish to the season. But that's my low light.
I'm ready now, William. I'll take it from here. I think when we met at the bye week, actually, William, you and I had the same answer, and that was the Travis Hunter injury, right? Because that rocked the team. It shook their confidence against Colorado State. If he plays against USC, guys, I really believe they would have won that football game. I mean, they spotted USC a 21-point lead and still almost won that game if they didn't, pussyfoot around with the last 7 minutes of the game. I mean, if we're just being completely honest. So I will say I think the Stanford second half was awful, and I believe I mentioned when we convened at the bye week that was one of them. But for me, I think it's going to be the UCLA game, and here's why. They had 2 weeks off, and nothing changed. That was extremely disheartening, and it really said, all right, well, the back half of this year is going to be a slog. They had 2 weeks off, and my biggest problem was, first half to second half against Stanford, they were doing the same exact stuff, and Stanford just caught up eventually, and there were no adjustments made. And then I thought to myself, well, they just put that on tape. There's no way after a self-scout that you don't come out and do things differently against UCLA, and it was the same exact thing, and UCLA was just waiting for it. And that was the worst game of the year by the offensive line. They were running for their lives. Talented players, but also the same exact scheme. That was when I knew Sean Lewis wasn't the guy. And it was like, okay, the back half of this year is going to suck, isn't it? And it did. So that would be the lack of adjustment over the bye week and real accountability of what's going on in the program. It also raised another red flag for me about Prime, that he didn't see some of this stuff over the bye week and wasn't anticipatory in thinking about it.
I got to go a slightly different direction. It's interesting to me that, when we did that podcast at that point, obviously the injury to Travis Hunter was a lot more fresh, but that one has sort of faded. But another thing from right after that just makes me so fargan angry is that Oregon game, and particularly that POS, can I say POS, Dan Lanning and his smug, just punk attitude, talking trash in the locker room, surrounded by all his guys, and the things he said, we're working for click, whatever, the guys on our team are working just as hard as the guys on his team. He inherited a bunch of friggin' 5 stars, and I caught myself there almost.
It's a good catch. Got a snow cone there in the outfield.
But it still sticks, and I bet it eats at prime too. He's too classy to mention it. I'm not classy, so I will mention it. But that whole, because of the way Dan Lanning handled it, I don't like getting my backside kicked under any circumstances, but when you got some smug punk being like that to me just sticks, and it's going to stick for a long time.
I was watching the Pac-12 championship game with Oregon and Washington last night as we record this. And every time Dan Lanning's face came on the screen, William, I thought of you.
It takes a lot for a dude to pass up Tom Osborne on my pantheon of hate.
Is that where you're at with Lanning?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We're there. We made it. He climbed the mountaintop.
No joke. I pulled up an episode we did where you said, Dan Lanning, bring your butt to Denver, Colorado, because we're going to have words. And I enjoyed that very much. And
it still has
rivalries are good for sports. I will always contend that.
Yeah, and with that said, I'm happy to be leaving the Pac-12. God Almighty, am I sick of that conference?
It was very sad. Did you see how strategic George Kliavkoff was with the trophy celebration? There was not a photo angle to have him in it. He was down there during the trophy presentation the entire time, but his face was always turned back, and he never gave the cameras the opportunity, which I kind of get. Like, you want the focus to be on Washington. Great season, undefeated, going to the college football playoff. You don't want the faltering conference to be the headline there. But man, he just backed his way. He grew a goatee and backed his way out of the Pac-12.
A little disguise for his next job interview.
Mission Impossible.
That's right. Rip the mask off.
I got to go with A.U. Mainer's incredible touchdown catch.
Oh my God, that guy.
Which tied it 43 in overtime. Matt, were you were down on the field with me at that point, right?
I would imagine. I was watching that one from right above, and I was in the staircase at that moment, because I remember watching that, and that was the moment that you just went, okay, it's just not
it wasn't even a feeling of that's not their day. It was like there was some type of capital given out there to the universe to get College Game Day, Fox Noon kickoff out here. Things have gotten to a fever pitch with Colorado recruiting and just the football program in general. And I don't know, maybe it's that PTSD that you have covering this program for over 2 decades now, but that was a moment where I was like, just this feeling sinking into you that this season isn't going to be what you thought it was going to be. And I really did feel that in that moment, and I wanted to kind of fight that, but it was there.
The kick return against Washington State also sucked. Being there live for that kick return at against Washington State that they allowed, make it 14-7, and then you're just like, game's over. Well, game's over. You know what I mean? Like, maybe you had a chance. No, game's over. The other one, Oregon with the fake punt. That was there were a couple, there were probably 3 just daggers this year. The fake punt at Oregon, right? The A.O. Manor catch, and then I'd say the kick return at Washington State, where you just knew it wasn't meant to be.
Sean, what is going to get those beautiful words singing for the Buffaloes in a positive narrative next season? What do they need to get in this roster going into 2024?
Well, for me, I think it's home run hires, especially with the news today about Nick Williams. So I think home run hires at the offensive coordinator, offensive line spot, the backfilling Nick Williams. I think that's the key, because those are the things that are going to lead to filling in some of the on the field needs. So obviously the offensive line has to be completely rebuilt, more than being retooled with some of the exits this week. And then after the offensive line, I think they need a big influx of talent and bodies at the linebacker spot. And I think it's critical for them to be able to pull in the next QB1 in this offseason. So whether that's continuing to court Anton Hill or finding somebody else, they've got to have somebody that gets into the program that they can that they can start to build a future around, because, as we saw this year too, Staub was, I mean, he gave it everything he had, and I don't think he was as bad as people expected, but I also don't think that he showed that he's the guy who's going to take over this program once Shedeur heads to the NFL. So those are the top 3 positional needs on my list.
Who wants to jump in next?
Yeah, go ahead, William.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I think it's got to begin and end with left tackle on offense. We don't have one. And it's, arguably the second most important position on the team. And I don't know who that would possibly be. I'm not sure Washington could flip and play that position, and I'm not sure he's got the athleticism to do it either. So clearly a left tackle. And then I would say, quite frankly, a game-changing pass rusher would be the next thing. And then, man, we just need a couple of road grading guards. But I kind of got to go with Sean. It all doesn't matter if we don't get the right coaches in there, man. I mean, we got to have the right offensive coordinator to take advantage. And I think either Matt or Sean said earlier, we got to have the right offensive coordinator who can take advantage of what Shedeur does well and not waste his last year there. So you got to bring in somebody that matches with his talent and skills, and put in an offense that matches what he's able to do, and with a quality offensive line coach. So I would say left tackle, guard, and pass rusher, and then the right assistant coaches.
I'm going to go to the coach as well. Also, obviously they need better linemen, and now you need a left tackle and all that. But look, guys, I mean, this was an offense that struggled to adjust all year. They came out primarily doing the same things. There was a real lack of creativity, I felt like, from just a design perspective overall. Like at the TCU game, it looked one way, but then we kept seeing just that, right? So that was a problem. And a rock star offensive line coach. That's tough, because to keep those guys is always going to be a challenge, number one. And number two, as Sean mentioned, if you don't have the quarterback for next year, then yeah, you want that guy for this year. But at the same time, like, where is the importance if you're just rolling out some freshman in 2025? That's also challenging. So I think, dogs overall everywhere. You're probably good at corner. Safety, you're probably good. Linebacker, you need some help there. And defensive line, you're going to need a lot of help again. Some of those guys got better, but you just need a different quality of player there. You really do. I love what Sal Sinceri did throughout the season. I think his unit was one of the few that progressively did improve throughout the season. So that was impressive. But it all comes down to how well you can protect Shedeur. I mean, if they can give that kid time. I mentioned this at the end of the year. I can't remember what game I was watching, but it had to be like 2 weeks ago. And, or I don't even remember. It was some Missouri. Yeah, it might've been Missouri. The quarterback looked good. I'm like, Shedeur is way better than this kid. This kid just has time. Like, I would love to see what Shedeur could do with legitimate time to process information and make those decisions, because that is really going to be the difference between whether or not they're a legitimate, they're legitimate offense. And I also believe it's running the football. One of the guys I'm going to say is already on their roster, but Alton McCaskill. Like, they need him to be the guy that they recruited him to be. If they can get that guy next year, then they should have a balanced running game. They should.
Well, Matt, you said something that just really flipped a switch for me. And I've been saying this. You said a rock star offensive line coach, and for Christ's sakes, can we hire a guy out of Power 5 team, for the love of God? We took a guy last year who's never coached at the Power 5 level. We hired a Louisiana guy who was not even coaching high school, for Christ's sake. McIntyre brought in his guys from frickin' San Jose State. For the love of God, can Colorado, a Power 5 team, hire a Power 5 frickin' offensive line coach who has done this before?
And to your point, Jonathan Smith, one of the most important things I was reading an interview, he said in going to Michigan State was bringing his offensive line coach with him, right? So we'll see how that happens, but that's so important. It really is.
I don't know how you follow up William's passion. I really don't. I love you, man.
I breathe into a bag. I'm calm.
Yeah, I mean, you guys articulated the needs on the offensive line pretty well. I do want to focus more on linebacker. Nate Landman, for me, kind of showed what an elite top level linebacker can do for a defense. And they haven't had that since him. And Jawan Mitchell kind of showed a few flashes of that, but it wasn't always the most disciplined football that he was playing. He was kind of a wrecking ball out there making plays on his own at times. And then we still don't know to this day what happened with him late in the season. But that's a spot. If you can really land a difference maker at linebacker, this is a defense that goes from kind of bordering on giving up 30 points a game to, I think, even 24, 23 points a game in terms of scoring defense that group is capable of if you get Vonta Bentley the right running mate next year. Assuming that Bentley comes back, we don't know what his plans are, but that's a spot defensively that I really look to and say that this is going to be either a really good defense or a suspect defense going into next year, is whether or not they can find that guy. And I understand Nate Landman's not maybe a fair comparison to throw out there, but he is the guy when I look to defensively at that linebacker position that can really can kind of elevate everybody around him.
Yeah, I had hopes coming into the season that Vonta Bentley was going to be that guy, based on just watching some of his film from his time at Clemson, and and the fact that you were getting a guy from an elite program who had played significantly. He wasn't a guy that he obviously was leaving because he had been passed by some younger, very high end talent, but he wasn't a guy that had just set the bench. So I was a little disappointed. I think he's obviously serviceable, and he did a good job, and probably was underappreciated this year. A little, something happened with his development. I think physical development in the last couple of years, he was a lot stiffer than I thought he would be. Was not very fluid, and really just was not a read the play, fill the hole linebacker. He's a guy that would bring it and would, when he did fill, was filling it with some physicality. But he was best, I think, this season when they were putting schemes together that kind of let him, roam a little bit free or come around. He was good at sacking the quarterback when they would bring him around the edge. Do some of those sort of things, but his sideline to sideline, play in the middle of the field left a lot to be desired. So I agree, Adam. If they can find that real stud linebacker, that real athlete that they can put in, that's a playmaker, and let Vonta Bentley kind of play a different role in the middle, I think that's going to be a big help to the defense.
One thing about the linebackers, you said Nate Landman, but Sean just brought up the side to side. What about like an Addison Gillum? That type of kid who's big and can really motor, right? And I thought Landman was really good downhill getting in the backfield, but like sideline to sideline, Addison was really special, I remember. So I think
that's
right.
What we thought Demoy Kennedy was going to be this year, and it just never panned out, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you can stop the run, if that's 1B, you need a couple of really rock solid, maybe even a few more D tackles, a couple of dudes who are, what you need, an edge rusher who you have to who the other team creates a protection plan for.
Right.
That's what you need.
That's what I was saying too, is one of my top needs is that one guy that you have to design an offense around, an Alfred Williams type of guy that you have to account for every single play. Now you got to double that guy. Now you got to chip that guy. Now you got to use a running back on him, whatever. It's hard to find good linebackers. And, again, I liken it to standing in the middle of the interstate and trying to read cars, but the ones that are great at it, great running back and great linebackers have similar things. They have that vision, right? And it's almost like an instinct. And I think it's that they process things more quickly. They take all this chaos and they just focus out all the junk, and that's where the hole is. That's where the ball is, and that's what I'm going to go. He used to amaze me with Nate Landman. He didn't defeat blocks. He didn't get blocked. He avoided them. He saw where the ball was, and he'd go under him. He'd go behind him, and it's not that he had to beat up a big offensive guard. Is that he just saw where the ball was going. He got there first, and that kind of a guy just makes it so much easier on defense to call plays.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say, while we're making a wish list, can I just add a road grading tight end to the equation too?
I got 4 more questions. Are we thumbs up to continue this, or are you guys I mean, this is going on kind of a 2-hour podcast here, but I appreciate you guys. Let's close it out here. I want to get your favorite memory from your CU experience in the Pac-12.
Okay, it's got to be winning the Pac-12 South, right? You know, I that whole journey was really special. There was 27 seniors on that team for Mike McIntyre in 2016, which I don't think you're going to see again. And they were really good kids. You know, they were really good guys who had bonded really tightly, and there was a ton of leadership at almost every position on that team. And you go back and you watch that team, they were nasty defensively, right? I mean, generating turnovers, holding teams to field goals. There are a bunch of games that year, the Stanford game, the UCLA game, Utah to an extent where they won it defensively, which was cool because I hadn't seen a Colorado team with that good of a defense in a while. So it's got to be winning the Pac-12 South in 2016. It just does.
Didn't they have 4 or 5 NFL draft picks on that defense? Jordan Carroll got drafted.
More than that, yeah.
Four
Colorado could, to piggyback off your point there, Matt, there could be a national championship team in Colorado that I cover that I don't know if I would revere them as much as the 2016 Buffs. Like Cepho, Phillip, like just the journey that they went through, that you all went through together. And John Snelson did such a great job of capturing that whole season. And, you know, Mike McIntyre's personality wasn't electric by any means, but it made you kind of buy into the heartbeat of that locker room. And I think this offseason, it will give me peace to watch the Rise series, just to kind of feel through Cepho's eyes. And I mean, that was a special group of human beings.
Yeah, I guess I'll just jump in there next, and it's going to be two moments from that 2016 season too. And one of them was, I can't remember which game it was. It might have been Utah or the one at Washington State, but Philip Lindsay gets the ball about the 10-yard line. And they hit him about 3, and another guy hits him, and I just remember our announcer Mark
Johnson.
Lindsay, and he forces his way into the end zone. You know, all $120 of them. You know, just a heart with legs.
That's
right. You know, and that's one of those great moments. And then the other one was I think the Washington State game, and I'm trying to remember the defensive back that had a big tackle on a 4th down towards the end of that game. I was up at the top of where all the players' parents sit, and I was standing next to his parents that whole game, and 2 things stick out about that is that defense showed up every single time they had to. And then they just said, to hell with this offense. Cepho's going to go off tackle every frickin' time. And that guy would get as much as he needed. You know, if it was 3 yards and 1 inch, he got 3 yards and 2 inches. And they just kept doing it. And they just kept beating the hell out of that kid. And he just wouldn't take no for an answer. And just being there with the players' parents up there on that east side of the stadium, you know, at the top of the lower bowl, and watching that all happen was just so fun and so exciting. And you know, I was with this one defensive back's parents, and he was having a great game, and they were so excited, and it was just a lot of fun. So those would be my 2 moments from the Pac-12, and outside of that, it's pretty grim.
Yeah.
If you see Cepho Lufau, sorry to cut you off, Sean. If you see Cepho Lufau out in public, wherever you are in the future, buy that guy a meal, because I know that those hits took a wearing on his body as that season went along. He felt the brunt of all of that, and so I think the Buffalo Horde Award should be renamed after Cepho Lufau at some point.
Yeah,
I agree. You know, he's actually becoming a firefighter right now. I was talking to him a little. I was talking to him a little while ago, and I was like, "Look, man, if you had to come break that door down to save me,
right?
I trust you." Yeah,
right. Of all the guys I've known at CU football to be a hero, he's the one.
Yeah. I don't know if you were going to go there next, Adam, but it's kind of ironic that 2016 season for me holds both the favorite memory and then also probably counts as the least favorite memories. And so, you know, I think there were enough lows throughout the Pac-12 era to fill a phone book. But in terms of being the least favorite, my favorite still, and I think it was the win in Eugene. And the moment out of that was the play by, I think it was Akello Witherspoon, was it,
right
in the
Yep.
end zone
Yep.
that ended.
Yep.
That is the highlight of the Pac-12 experience for me, partially just because it was Oregon. But that same season has some of the least favorite memories too. The Cepho going down in the big house was just crushing. That was brutal. Missing the opportunity to knock off the number 4 team in the country on the biggest stage, right? And then the tail end of that season after that such a feel good season, so many great moments, and then to get shellacked in the title game against Washington, and then to really kind of go into that Alamo Bowl game with a lot of the hope out of the season put behind you, and then to get just waxed by Oklahoma State in that Alamo Bowl game. Those 3 moments were kind of just the low points for me, because that season had taken us to a place where really at that point in time you hadn't been as a CU fan in 15 years.
And to go back to that Michigan game, Derek McCartney also blew out his knee in that game. And prior to that, we had bookends with him and Jimmy Gilbert, which man, we hadn't had that. We hadn't had that since Alfred and Canavas almost. And,
really
and those
point.
guys were so effective and taking. And then they had to move that. Who was the kid, the walk-on defensive back? Then they had to kind of play him as a hybrid up there outside.
Moeller, Ryan Moeller.
Right, exactly. Yeah, man. Sean, your comments kind of made me think, if we had a couple more years in the Pac-12, I wonder if Oregon would replace the Cornhuskers as our most hated team.
I think they were well on their way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thinking back to that Michigan loss back in 2016, Diego Gonzalez also tore his Achilles kicking off in that game.
That's right.
You mentioned Derek McCartney got hurt. Cepho Lufau got knocked out. Those 3 guys lived together, and they all got hurt on the same day.
I was out at that game. That was the first time I've been back to CU Michigan since the game, the catch, and was back there. My best friend is from Ann Arbor, so his family could get us tickets. And so, we're at the end of the first quarter. I'm like, and it was quiet as a mouse in there, man. Because they're like, holy shit, this team's going to beat us.
It felt like that up until he left. That was one of the best throws too. The throw on one foot to Shea for the touchdown was,
my God,
that was nuts. That was nuts. That season taught me just what leadership really looks like in college football. You know what I mean? Because it's not it's every position room, everybody working together for a collective. And maybe that was kind of what Cavassier Smoke was speaking to a little bit, in that he didn't feel that type of connective tissue, obviously. But as Adam said, that was a team that had gone through the fiery crucible for 4 years and had taken so many bad losses, and then just finally said enough. And that was really cool.
I love the fact that when Akello Witherspoon picked that ball off, that there was a young reporter to my left that didn't know the rules about not cheering in a press conference. And she just kind of grabbed my arm and shook me, because that's what I wanted to do if I was able to do that in the press box, because you had seen these guys suffer through so many tough losses, and even post game going down and watching everybody just interact with each other outside. It's funny, Oregon spends all this money on their facilities, but the visitors have literally the worst facilities in the entire Pac-12, because they're not spending that money on the opposing team coming out. But to see the look on people's faces, and Steven Montez coming to the post-game press conference, and Brian asked him, what did you think when Bryce Bobo made that second touchdown catch? And Steven said, da-na-na, da-na-na. And I was like, okay, we've got a good interviewing our quarterback for the future. And unfortunately, Steven's career didn't play out the way we were hoping. But
oh my goodness.
That was a fun moment. That was his best game as a Buff.
Ever. And I think in many ways it was almost a disservice to himself, because everybody expected that from and it was such an electric performance. My God, you're thinking, oh my God, we got the guy finally after all, and just never came about.